Welcome to FiST Chat, your source for news and discussions in film science and technology, hosted by Steve Kern and Ben Warner. Visit our website at fistchat.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film science and technology. My name's Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks Ben. Hi FiST Chat fans, it's great as always to be back.
Absolutely. I was just saying before, I hope my nose holds together. I've had a bit of an allergy this morning, so I don't know what it is, but I'll try not to sneeze too often during this particular podcast today. Now, we've got quite a bit to get through, but before we get into our main topic, I just wanted to mention that Office for iPad got released in the last few days and had a bit of a trial run on it on the iPad, and even though I don't have the Office 365 subscription, I can still read and share documents, and to be honest, on an iPad, that's about all I want to do with Office documents anyway. I don't think it's really that practical to do much else. Interestingly, for the iPhone, the Office mobile app allows you to do the whole thing. So they've actually made it free now on the iPhone to do any reading, editing of Office documents. So probably maybe 2 years. They could have done this 2 years ago, maybe, but it's a welcome addition to the iPad, I think.
Well, it is. I mean, for all of us who use Office, it's good to be able to have access to it wherever we are, whatever device we're using. Exactly.
And I know I'll probably be using it to do some reviewing of documents, not necessarily of actually composing them. But anyway, it's all good. All right, today we're going to talk about, I think, a rather interesting topic. I guess, it's always the Doc Brown DeLorean turning rotten food into energy thing. But yeah, we've got the idea of turning your rotten food into energy is quite appealing given the amount of food wastage in the world. And the Huffington Post had a good article on it. Picture one meal in your day and imagine it getting tossed into the trash before you even get a chance to bite into it. Every single day, we either lose or waste 1/3 of our food. That's 1.3 billion tons a year. Yeah. Not only could we have fed people with that food, but it's an astonishing waste of energy as well. Just think of all the energy that goes into growing, fertilizing, processing, and transporting 1.3 billion tons of food a year. That's just mind-boggling. Yeah. But it's a symptom of, I guess, the industrialized nature of food production in today's world. I mean, we're that far removed from growing our own food too. So is it really that surprising that it's that much, given the way the system's set up?
Well, it is. And the interesting thing is that, yes, in the first world, it's about 30 to 40% of food is wasted, and that's wasted by us just not consuming it before it goes off or not eating all our meals and just binning it. Whereas in the developing nations, unfortunately, it's the same percentage, and that's just because they don't have the technology to get to food to people before it does spoil. So it's a global problem, and I think what people forget is how much input goes in. You do have to grow those crops, and I mean, they take time. They don't grow overnight, even hydroponic ones. Yeah. So lots of energy goes into them, lots of fertilizer, and then, to think that it gets wasted is terrible. So it's good. It's good to know that our food scraps, perhaps, what we would typically use as organics or for a mulch could be converted. I think, though, that it probably, even though this is a great idea, it would just be better if we didn't waste food in the first place.
Exactly. But I guess in lieu of that, and as this article has been talking about, Harvest Power, the company that has developed this technology, they're handling over 200,000 tons of waste a year. 40,000 tons is diverted to what they call an energy garden, where basically trucks back up, dump the food waste onto the tipping floor where it's mixed with yard waste, shredded, and then pushed into long rectangular chambers with airtight doors. When those doors are sealed, the organic materials are biochemically degraded into organic acids. The solid materials go back into the compost stream, and the organic liquids go into the digester, where anaerobic bacteria release methane that is used to fuel a 1 megawatt cogeneration power plant. Turning all of that food waste into energy is a good idea, but the anaerobic digestion process leaves you with a hot mess called digestate. Harvest Power closes the loop by composting the scentless but not very appetizing looking digestate. So they've thought of how to get around some of that side effects of the process that they have.
Oh, these guys definitely know what they're doing, and it's great to see technology being used in this way. It's as I say, it's it's a big step forward, and I'd prefer to see this sort of power generation probably over when we get corn and turn it into biofuel. I think that's not really very good.
Yeah,
corn can be eaten. You shouldn't be growing things that can be eaten for power. But at least this is waste, so I think it's a really good model, and I hope it gets some traction.
It's an interesting concept, really. The idea that it's waste kind of suggests that it's not useful, and
good point.
You go back to the thought that everything in the way the universe works is that it's just energy being transferred from one form to another, and the fact that we could be tapping some technology and that can sort of take that waste and then make it useful. Is it really going to be waste in the end? Almost, it's waste from one process, but then it becomes fuel for another process. It's a fascinating way of kind of how it all works.
Well, you've already put your finger on it, Ben. Waste is only a recent phenomenon, out of the industrial age, last couple of 100 years, really, and large amounts of waste, and that couldn't be composted or reconverted or reused. And this is what's great about it. We're moving back into that sort of environment where we will recycle. And we've made this point on FiST Chat before. I think during the peak growth at the start of this century, that if we'd continue to go that way by 2030, we would need an extra half of a planet to actually provide enough resources. So the only answer has to be, short of going out to asteroids, which there are people already planning on doing, but short of going out to asteroids, will be that we just have to recycle. There just won't be any choices.
Yeah.
So it's probably the start of a long-term trend.
And it's probably just one example of many. I'm sure that this could, it could be applied to other things as well in terms of recycle, because it's basically recycling. This is what it really is.
I mean, this is still probably in the realms of crackpot ideas, but people have actually come up with the plasma incinerator. Theoretically, it doesn't exist yet, where you would feed anything, a bit like Doc does in Back to the Future. You feed anything into it, and the plasma incinerator would reduce the atoms going in there into their basic form, allowing you then to reconstruct new products out of your recycling. But that's a little bit far-fetched at the moment.
Well, it's a future we can look forward to at any rate. All right, we might move on from that. We'll move on to our news bites now. It's an interesting topic, and we love our recycling here on FiST Chat, and seeing other examples of it's always a good thing. Now, our film news bite. We've got two of our news bites related to the missing Malaysian Airlines flight, the tragedy there. The first one, though, our film news bite from the Sydney Morning Herald, there was an Aussie disaster film that had to be shelved because of plot similarities to what happened to the flight. Basically the idea, it was a film called Deep Water, and similar to Bait 3D, which came out last year to huge numbers in China, I think it was, and basically the plane crashes in the ocean, and then the sharks pick off people one by one. And it's interesting whenever there's a huge disaster or any kind of disaster that is so public. And it's happened with film before that it gets affected. Someone just pointed out to me the other day, actually, that when the original Spider-Man was going to be released, they did a trailer that had the World Trade Center buildings in it, and Spidey sort of flinging between them. And then, obviously, after September 11, they had to can that trailer. So things like that can happen. I mean, I know it's a trivial sort of afterthought in comparison to the disaster itself, but it does happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit dubious about this, Ben. Call me a shade cynical. Considering we don't know what happened to MH370, I don't know what similarities they could say, except the plane landed in the ocean. I don't for a second think that whatever happened to MH370, the people on board were picked off by sharks at the end. But, if you want to publicise your script by using a tragedy, human tragedy, to make yourself a bit better known, I guess they've seized the opportunity, haven't they?
But not if they can't make the film out of it.
They'll make the film out
Just
of it.
a little bit, leave it a bit longer, and it'll come out.
You know, they probably didn't have the investment to go ahead with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now they might.
Yeah, it's that's the cynicism coming out right there.
It is, I'm afraid.
All right, our science news bite from the Sydney Morning Herald: 2 for 1, lose sleep and brain cells. Feel like you're losing your marbles when you haven't had enough sleep? Well, you might not be too far off the mark. Research has previously found that we can never fully repay a sleep debt. This is troubling, given that a sleep debt mounts from a chronic time of lack of time spent with the Sandman. So too does our risk of weight gain, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and memory loss. A new study has found that chronic lack of sleep may also lead to irreversible loss of brain cells.
Oh, yeah. Just like a knock on the head. It does. Yes.
So if you're only sleeping 3 hours a night for a whole year, you'll have less brain capacity than at the beginning of the year. Is that too simple a way to look at it?
It's not too simple a way to look at it, but I don't. This is that sort of research that puzzles me. I haven't actually been able to get back and look at the actual experiment itself or what their actual findings are. I mean, the popular finding is, it's killing brain cells, but then so does a bump to the head, so does drinking alcohol, and any other number of activities that you could pursue. So, yeah, I'm sure lack of sleep, as we know that optimal sleep is between 7 and 9 hours duration every night. Too much is no good for you. Too little is no good for you. And there's no question. Interesting, though, that some of the nootropics or the so-called smart drugs actually work by disturbing sleep centres in the brain to keep you up longer or to make your brain more active. So I don't know whether this is a good thing or whether it's a bad thing when it comes to, drugs like the racemates. But who knows? Anyway, it's very interesting research.
I was just wondering, as a side note, if when you're doing a study like that, there could be any number of causes for loss of brain cells, and how do you isolate? I think, as you were mentioning, how can you isolate that it was due to lack of sleep?
Generally, the experimental design on these sorts of studies are pretty good.
So they'd have to get people that were behaving in similar sorts of ways, wouldn't they? Yeah.
So they would screen people beforehand. They would screen their histories. Normally, these sorts of studies sometimes take a couple of years to set up to find the right sorts of groups and the right sorts of control groups. And they will have, specific groups very often as some sort of control or comparison as well. So they're usually pretty well set up. So I think that this would be reasonably sound research. I don't doubt it for a second. It's just how it's being communicated, because it's a bit like, red wine's great for you, but, they very often forget to tell us how. And it's not the fact that you're drinking it and enjoying dinner.
Exactly. All right, and finally, our tech news by bringing it back to the Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370, and this is directly related to it. US technology to join hunt from the Sydney Morning Herald again. Cutting-edge US technology vital to finding the flight black box recorder has arrived in Perth, just off Australia, but will take several more days to get out to the search area for the plane. So they're really, they're obviously amassing as much technical capability, manpower, the whole works, and it's interesting that the searchers sort of come to our backyard in a sense that it's just off the coast of Perth, and sort of deepens that mystery that the flight really went way off course, and knowing what happened to it is, I guess, going to settle all of our minds collectively in the public consciousness, because it's a very, very strange sort of incident that's occurred.
Oh, look, this is without question, it's bizarre. I will state right from the start, I'm no expert, but I've watched a lot of air crash investigation. And one thing that the investigators do, no matter what you think of this particular investigation, which has had its troubles with information being shared quite obviously, they never jump to conclusions. And I think that, if you look at what happened the first few days, the mystery around this being one of the safest planes ever, the fact that there were people on there with dubious passports, looking into the background of the pilots. People very quickly jump to conclusions. But the reality is that if you watch a lot of air crash investigation, and I'm sure there are FiST Chat fans that do, you'll realise that when things go wrong, they're usually a series of unexpected events. And for all we know, those pilots might have fought very bravely. There's been some evidence which has been sort of overlooked in the last 2 weeks, such as the eyewitness account that saw a plane on fire, on the New Zealander on the oil rig, saw the flames extinguished and the plane fly on.
Okay.
Which may have been the pilots turning. It flew to a very high altitude. We don't know why. And it turned around. Could have been to try to get to Langkawi Airport in Malaysia, which was the nearest airport. We don't know what happened. And those planes are very safe. They can fly themselves. So if there was a mid-air tragedy, some sort of catastrophic, failure of the aircraft systems or some sort of catastrophic event that may not be linked to, terrorism or any subterfuge or sabotage, the plane may well have been able to correct its, flight control and flowing on.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there's such advanced pieces of machinery and technology, planes, but at the end of the day, it's still a machine, and something could go wrong. You just don't. You can't ever discount the possibility that it's
not
always
the unexpected.
And it's not 100% foolproof.
No, I think what's been amazing about this is that they actually have been able to find the plane. So for whatever reason, the transponders and a lot of the communication systems on the plane ceased to function. Once again, we don't know why. They ceased to function, and it goes to show that the engines, even though they weren't sending any messages back to the satellite, were still just sending a hello ping, which if the software had been there would have been sending data back to the satellites on the engine performance.
Yeah.
But it was just that ping alone, and they couldn't use triangulation because you can't with the geostationary satellites. So they actually used a Doppler effect on the signal strength to determine which way the plane flew. Of course, they didn't know whether it was north or south. And when they realised that they couldn't locate the plane anywhere in the northern airspace, predominantly because any of the military systems between China, India, Russia would have found a plane flying through there very quickly. They knew it had to be south. They turned south, and they know the plane ran out of fuel somewhere over the Southern Ocean. And by the look of the wreckage being plentiful and close together, it's likely the plane went down in one piece when it ran out of fuel. So it is a mystery. We don't know why this has happened. It is a tragedy, but, they're working very hard to find that black box. And we hope that there'll be answers there. There won't be any voice recordings, or it's unlikely there'll be any voice recordings because the black box runs on a 30-minute loop.
Yeah.
So if the pilots were incapacitated 7 hours earlier, there won't be any recordings there, but all of the plane's flight data will be there. And that may well tell us what happened, if indeed they find it. A huge area.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we might wrap it up there. So thanks again, Steve, for the chat.
Anytime, Ben. Thanks, FiST Chat fans. And if anyone is, converting their waste already into power at home, let us know.
Absolutely. All right. Don't forget our website, FiSTChat.com. You can get all of our links there. We've got our ebook, The FiST Report, at fistreport.com, hosted on Amazon, only 99 cents per copy. We've got 2 books there, so that helps to support the show. We've got our weekly blogs on photography on Instagram and Flickr, so feel free to check those out. And if you think anyone's interested in our weekly ramblings on film science and technology, then feel free to send them to our website. We'd greatly appreciate that. So that's it for this episode, so we'll catch you next time.